She betrayed me when I trusted her with everything. I disappeared without a word. Years later she found me, and completely broke down. Welcome to Amelia's Stories. Keep listening. These real stories about love, trust, and betrayal will give you true life experiences. If you're new, drop your location in the comments and don't forget to subscribe, like, and share. Please stick with me. My name is Evan Mercer, and for a long time I believed I was just an ordinary husband living an ordinary life. I wasn't wealthy. I wasn't dramatic. I loved my wife, showed up every day, and believed that loyalty was enough to keep a marriage standing. Lauren Mercer wasn't just my wife. She was my college sweetheart, the girl who knew my worst fears and my best dreams. We grew up together, or at least I thought we did. This isn't a story I ever planned to tell. Even now, putting these words together feels like reopening something I worked hard to bury. For a long time I convinced myself silence was strength, that the past didn't deserve a voice. But some truths don't fade just because you ignore them. They wait. What happened between Lauren and me wasn't a sudden accident or a single bad choice. It was slow, deliberate, thought out in ways I didn't understand until it was already too late. The betrayal wasn't just about what she did. It was about how easily it fit into her life without me noticing. When the truth finally settled in, I didn't react the way people expect. There were no raised voices. No dramatic scenes. No pleading or rage. I didn't scream. I didn't confront her. I vanished. Before everything fell apart, our marriage looked solid from the outside. Lauren and I built our life the slow, ordinary way. Early mornings, shared grocery lists, cheap furniture, and quiet nights on the couch talking about the future. We struggled financially at first, counting every dollar, celebrating small wins like paying off a credit card or finally taking a short vacation. Those years bonded me to her deeply. I believed we were a team. Lauren was charming and driven, the kind of woman people gravitated toward. She had big ambitions and a restless energy that I admired. Over time, though, that energy stopped including me. She became more focused on herself, her goals, her space. I told myself it was normal. People grow, marriages evolve. I didn't want to be the insecure husband who questioned his wife's independence. I worked longer hours to keep us stable, sometimes coming home exhausted but proud that I was providing. I trusted her completely. That trust made me blind. The changes were subtle at first. Late nights explained away as work, conversations that felt shorter, colder. She started guarding her time, disappearing for hours with explanations that didn't quite add up. When I reached for her emotionally, she seemed distracted, distant. Every warning sign had an excuse ready. I dismissed the quiet dinners, the lack of warmth, the growing space between us. I told myself love wasn't about suspicion. It was about faith. If you truly loved someone, you didn't interrogate them. You believed. So I kept believing. And in doing so, I unknowingly gave her all the freedom she needed to betray me without resistance. I didn't catch Lauren in the act, and there was no dramatic moment where everything exploded at once. The truth came to me quietly in pieces when I wasn't even looking for it. One ordinary evening turned into the moment my life split in two. A small accident, a message seen out of context, a detail that didn't belong, was enough to make my stomach drop. Curiosity turned into dread as I kept looking, hoping I was wrong. That's when I saw his name. Caleb Rhodes. A man I knew. A man I trusted. Someone who had sat across from me, laughed with me, shook my hand like nothing was wrong. Realizing the betrayal involved him hurt almost as much as what Lauren had done. It meant this wasn't just secrecy, it was deception layered with familiarity. I didn't confront her. I didn't demand answers or explanations. I sat there in silence, scrolling through proof that felt unreal. Messages, dates, patterns, everything lined up. This wasn't recent. It had been happening for over a year, woven carefully into our marriage while I worked, planned, and believed. What destroyed me most wasn't just the affair itself. It was the tone of it. In private, she mocked me, my trust, my dedication, the way I built my life around her. While I stayed loyal and paid the bills, she turned my devotion into a joke shared with another man. There were no tears in that moment. Just a hollow understanding settling in. The marriage I thought I had was already gone, replaced by something calculated and cruel. And I realized, silently, that nothing I said could undo what I had just learned. After discovering the truth, I expected anger to take over. Rage felt like the natural response. Instead, something colder settled in. I remember sitting alone, realizing that confronting Lauren would only give her the chance to rewrite the story, to cry, deny, or justify what she'd already chosen to do. I didn't want explanations. I wanted out. That was the moment I decided silence would protect me more than any argument ever could. So I kept playing my role. I spoke when spoken to. I smiled when expected. Inside I was shutting down piece by piece. Every laugh felt mechanical. Every touch felt distant. I watched her lie effortlessly, moving through our home like nothing had changed, unaware that the version of me who loved her was already gone. Quietly I began preparing. I copied financial records, bank statements, insurance details, things I never thought I'd need to gather in secret. Each document felt like another nail sealing the truth. I didn't rush. I didn't panic. I moved carefully, methodically, as if planning an escape from a burning building without triggering the alarm. Lauren never noticed. She talked about her days, made plans, complained about small things, all while continuing her deception. That hurt more than the affair itself, the ease with which she lived two lives. Eventually I reached a breaking point, but it wasn't explosive. It was calm. A numb clarity where emotions stopped fighting reality. I understood then that the marriage wasn't something to save or argue over. It was already over. All that remained was deciding how to leave without losing myself in the process. The day I left wasn't dramatic. There was no storming out, no final speech. Lauren was away, and the house was quiet in a way it had never been before. I packed only what mattered: documents, a few clothes, nothing sentimental. I walked through each room once, not to reminisce, but to confirm I felt nothing tying me there anymore. On the table I left the divorce papers. That was it. No note. No explanation. No goodbye. I didn't want my last words to her to become something she could twist or remember fondly. Silence felt cleaner, final. When I closed the door behind me, it felt less like leaving a home and more like stepping out of a lie I'd been living in. I cut contact completely. Friends, acquaintances, anyone connected to that life. Gone. I changed numbers, closed accounts, erased access. I knew it would confuse people. I didn't care. Survival required disappearance. Lauren tried to reach me. I knew because the silence around me felt heavy with unanswered calls and messages I refused to read. I imagined the panic setting in, the questions forming, but none of that was my responsibility anymore. I had already given enough. I moved to another state under my real name, but everything else changed. New routines. New work. A different version of myself who didn't exist for someone else's convenience. I wasn't running from consequences. I was choosing peace. I didn't vanish to punish her. I vanished because staying would have destroyed what little of me remained. Starting over wasn't easy, but it was honest. And for the first time in a long while, honesty was enough. Starting over stripped me down to the basics. There was no dramatic comeback, no instant healing. I rebuilt my life the slow, painful way. One paycheck, one routine, one quiet night at a time. I took work that paid the bills and demanded consistency, even when my mind felt heavier than my body. Some days just getting out of bed felt like progress. Other days it felt like punishment. But I kept going. Over time, stability replaced chaos. I learned who I was without being someone's husband, without carrying the weight of betrayal on my shoulders every minute. The anger faded first, then the sadness. What remained was a calm respect for myself that I hadn't realized I'd lost. I stopped measuring my worth by how loyal I'd been to someone who didn't value it. Looking back, I understood that disappearing wasn't cowardice. It was survival. Staying would have meant constant doubt, endless explanations, and reopening wounds that never had a chance to close. Leaving gave me space to breathe, to heal on my own terms without watching the person who broke me pretend everything was fine. Years passed. The memories didn't vanish, but they changed. They scarred instead of bleeding. I could think about the past without feeling like it owned me. Lauren became a chapter one believed was finished, a name that no longer stirred emotion. I built a quiet, decent life. Nothing flashy, just honest. I thought that chapter was closed for good. I believed she was permanently behind me. That belief lasted until one ordinary day, when fate reminded me that some stories don't stay buried as easily as we hope. It was a regular morning at the cafe I'd started frequenting, the kind of place where nobody knew my past, where I could exist without explanation. I was halfway through my coffee when I saw her. Lauren. At first, I thought it was someone else. Her face carried the same features, but her eyes looked smaller, tired, haunted. She was scanning the room, unaware of me, unaware of how drastically our lives had diverged. Then our eyes met. Recognition struck her like a jolt. I could see it, the moment she realized who I was. Her expression froze, a mixture of shock, fear, and something softer I couldn't quite place. The confident, unbothered woman I had known was gone. She looked older, drained, beaten down by the choices she had made and the life she had created without me. I didn't move toward her. I didn't speak. Calmness anchored me while her panic grew palpable across the table that separated us. I could feel the power shift in the air. The dynamic that had once defined our marriage, the control, the comfort, the trust, was inverted. Now I held the composure. Now she looked like someone seeking answers she wasn't ready to hear. Her voice trembled, her hands fidgeted, but I remained distant, almost untouchable. I was no longer the man she had underestimated, the one she had thought would stay. I had rebuilt myself in silence and now the scales had tipped. For the first time in years I watched her struggle for control and I felt nothing but clarity. The reunion wasn't mine to savor. It was hers to endure. The moment came suddenly without warning. Lauren's composure crumbled in the middle of the crowded cafe, the same place where our paths had unexpectedly crossed. She sank into her chair, hands trembling, shoulders shaking as sobs overtook her. People glanced over, curious, sympathetic, but none of that mattered. All I could see was the woman who had once seemed untouchable, now unraveling completely before me. Through gasps and tears she began to speak. Her words tumbled out in a mixture of shame and desperation. She admitted, almost to herself as much as to me, that the affair with Caleb had destroyed everything she had. The life we had shared, the plans she once made with confidence, it was all gone. Her voice cracked as she confessed how quickly he had left her after she lost me, leaving her to face the consequences alone. And then, the confession that cut the deepest, she had never actually believed I would leave. The idea that I might walk away had never crossed her mind, and now, staring at the wreckage of her own choices, she realized how wrong she had been. I remained silent. I didn't speak, I didn't console her, I didn't reach out. There was nothing left to offer. This was her reckoning and my role was only to witness it. Watching her break was not satisfaction. It was the stark, quiet justice of truth. No comfort could undo the years of betrayal. No words could rebuild the trust she had destroyed. I listened, and that silence spoke louder than any argument ever could. I finally spoke, not out of anger, not to punish, but because silence had already served its purpose. My voice was steady, measured, carrying the weight of years she had taken from me. I told her how deeply she had wounded me, not just with the affair but with every lie, every subtle dismissal, every moment she treated my trust as a joke. I spoke of the nights I cried alone, the days I questioned my worth, the slow rebuilding of a life she had once thought she controlled. Then I told her how I healed. Quietly, deliberately, without her. I had rebuilt myself from the wreckage she left behind, piece by piece, learning that my value did not depend on her recognition or remorse. I had grown stronger, steadier, and more certain of who I was, all without her by my side. I made one thing clear: I didn't hate her. Hatred requires energy, and I had spent years learning how to live without wasting a single ounce of it on someone who had chosen betrayal over love. He simply no longer mattered in my life. Her face shifted as the reality settled in. This wasn't just a lost marriage she was facing. It was the realization that she had forfeited the future she could have had with me. The weight of her choices became visible in the slump of her shoulders, in the hollow look of recognition. I turned and walked away, not to punish, not to gloat, but because the story was over. My life, my peace, my future were mine alone, and I was moving forward without her, finally free. Looking back, I understand the true cost of betrayal. It isn't measured in tears or arguments. It's measured in the quiet erosion of trust, the slow unraveling of who you thought you were. Lauren's choices took more from me than I realized at the time. Years of certainty, the comfort of routine, the illusion of safety. But in that loss I found clarity. Disappearing wasn't revenge. It wasn't about hurting her or proving a point. It was survival. Every step I took away from that life was a step toward reclaiming myself, toward building a world where my value wasn't tied to someone else's whims. I learned that removing myself entirely from the chaos allowed me to breathe, think, and heal. The freedom of absence became my strongest tool, more powerful than any confrontation could have been. Silence became my statement. I didn't yell, I didn't argue, I didn't beg for recognition or apologies. I simply existed beyond her reach, living a life she could no longer touch. That quiet absence spoke louder than any words ever could. Now years later I'm at peace. The weight of betrayal no longer presses on me, the shadows of the past no longer dictate my days. I've built a life grounded in honesty, respect, and self-worth. Sometimes the strongest revenge isn't confrontation. Sometimes it isn't anger or punishment. Sometimes, the ultimate response is simply to live well without the person who broke you. And in that I've found my victory.